and welcome to another episode of the podcast brought to you by me, Simon Mitchell of IronParadiseFitness.com. Great to have you with me for what is set to be another awesome show with knowledge bombs falling out of the sky at every conceivable turn. I think you're going to love this one. So I better stop talking and let you get listening. But before we get into today's topic, answer me this question. Do you know what the hell I do when I'm not recording these podcasts? A strange question to ask, you might think. Now, the reason I ask this is because of a question I was sent in a DM on Instagram the other day, and it made me think, how many other people listening to the show are blissfully unaware of what my main business is? I'm certainly no marketing guru, but I thought I did a reasonably okay job. However, that may not be the case. So I'm going to rectify that right now. Quite bluntly, I can help you get leaner, healthier, and have you strutting around with sky-high confidence and a badass body, even if you're busy as fuck. Because it may surprise you, but I don't do podcasts and social media posts for a living. Although it might seem like it. Through Iron Paradise Fitness, I offer one of the most comprehensive online training and nutrition programs you will ever see. If you've ever worked with an online coach before, you will be amazed at the depth and detail you and I will go into with one of my programs. And by detail, I don't mean exercises and rep ranges. That stuff's important. But there's way more important things to do than that. My online coaching program, the Lean Life Blueprint, has you at the heart of everything. After all, you are a unique individual with specific circumstances and goals that are different to everyone else. And because I understand that, I create a training and nutrition program to fit you. And on top of that, I'm a coach who cares about you achieving your goals, which is why I put a lot of time and effort into the coaching process. Ultimately, my goal is to make you more knowledgeable about nutrition, training, and more importantly, how you can personally apply those principles in your everyday life. It's bad for business, but at the end of 12 weeks, I want you to feel so confident that you can fire me. That's right. Obviously, if you want to continue to work with me, which a lot of people do, then great, let's carry on. But I don't want you to feel like you need me as your crutch for the rest of your life. So if you like listening to the podcast and thinking to yourself, yeah, it'd be pretty cool to work with this guy, then I've put a link in the show notes where you can make an inquiry and book a free consultation call directly with me. I'll give you a no BS view of where you're at, and I'll tell you exactly what I think you should be doing and how I can help you do it. So hopefully my little sales pitch shed some light on what I actually do. But enough of all the marketing. You didn't come here for that. I'm not Joe Wicks, for fuck's sake. You came here to learn about protein. And let's get primed and ready to drop those knowledge bombs. Protein is the industry buzzword of the moment. It's up there with keto and intermittent fasting. In fact, it's probably the Mac Daddy of fitness industry phases at the moment. You can't go more than a couple of steps in your local supermarket before you're confronted by shelves full of protein products. And I'm doing the bunny ear inverted comma thing when I say that, but we'll get onto that little Pandora's box of bullshit very soon. Protein bars are pretty standard these days. Years ago, trying to find a protein bar in a supermarket wasn't exactly the easiest thing in the world. In fact, I would go so far as to say it would be easier to make it through an entire episode of Love Island without vomiting blood. And that's saying something. But now you'll find a whole array of protein products available. And it's not just the traditional bars and powders that are on offer. You'll see protein bread, protein milk, yogurt, protein cereal. It's just protein, protein, protein. I'm waiting for the day when protein chicken gets released as a product. It's like protein has become this magical thing that's going to be the answer to your prayers. Protein is now so ingrained in the mainstream psyche as being this wonder food type that marketing companies have just slapped it on their packaging to help shift a few more units. And it works. Clearly it works because the amount of protein products is on the increase with no sign of letting up. People are obsessed by protein numbers, but a lot of people struggle to increase their protein intake because they're not used to consuming those types of foods in higher quantities. So if you're one of those people, then you're left feeling like you did something wrong if you don't get the right amount of protein. But is it really that important? Should you become obsessed by the protein number your coach gave you if you want to lose fat and build muscle? The answer comes down to one thing, and that's you. What is it you're trying to achieve? Because that's the starting point from almost every question. And that applies not just to protein intake, but other aspects of your nutrition. For example, should you go high fat, low carb? Well, that depends on you. Should you do intermittent fasting? That depends on you too. It even extends through to your training because exercise selection should be derived from the mechanics of the person and the goal he or she is trying to achieve. The mindset of getting everyone to do bench presses and squats just because they're told they're the best is an archaic way of viewing things. Now, there are 3 broad categories of people when it comes to health and fitness, each of which need to put a varying degree of importance to their protein intake. But before we delve into the 3 categories of people, let's look at what this debate is actually about. What is the internet telling you you should do? And what's getting you worked up about protein anyway? Okay, so we know a high protein diet is beneficial on several levels, both for supporting fat loss and the development of muscle. It's also worth noting that protein does a lot more than that too, including supporting your body's immune function. Now, the most common guidelines you'll hear on protein intake are 1 gram per pound of body weight or 2 grams per kilo of body weight, and both will get you roughly the same number. Now, it's worth noting these numbers are based on research, so they're not bullshit. This isn't someone pulling a fact out of their ass and slapping it on an article somewhere. However, those numbers were used to provide you with something memorable and definitive to work with. After all, I'm sure you and I are the same when it comes to when we're unsure about something. A definitive answer is always the most welcome answer. Having someone answer a simple question like, how much protein should I eat? With the phrase, well, to answer that, first let me talk to you about optimal protein synthesis. Now that could lead you to roll your eyes and switch off immediately. So the short answer of 2 grams per kilo is much more welcome. I mean, do you really need to give a crap about how it works? Or do you just want to know what to do to get results? If it was me, it'd be the latter. Here's a quick cake analogy that's quite apt to further illustrate this point. I don't very often eat cake, but when I do, a lovely bit of coffee and walnut would go down a treat. Hint, hint, if any of you out there want to send me some. Now, when I've decided I do want some cake, I just want to eat some cake. I don't give a shit how you make the cake, I just want to enjoy eating the fucking thing. Just tell me where I need to go to get the best slice of coffee and walnut. I didn't need to know the ingredients, the cooking method, or any of that stuff. I just want cake. And it's the same with you and your nutrition questions. You just want the answers that get you the desired result. And this is a bit of a side tangent now, but this is my vision for the podcast. I want this podcast to be like the Google of fitness and nutrition podcasts, but a Google that only returns one answer, and it's the right one. Because how many times do you tune into a podcast only to hear the guy or girl waffle on for an hour without really giving you a straight answer? Too many fucking times, I bet. Anyway, I digress. Where the fuck was I with my point? Yes, protein numbers. So the guidelines of 1 gram per pound or 2 grams per kilo are there to keep things simple. But the reality is there's a little more to it than that, which should hopefully put your mind at ease when it comes to obsessing over your macros. Now, before the cake and Google run, I mentioned there are 3 types of people we need to consider when looking at protein requirements. I'm going to label these as inactive, endurance, and lifters. And I'm going to switch to talking in kilograms, so apologies to my American friends, I love you, but it has to be done. It's because of the metric system. It's why a quarter pounder with cheese is called a Royale with cheese. P.S. Brownie points for getting the movie reference. Let's start with the inactive people first. So you lazy motherfuckers, jokes, people, jokes, need the least amount of protein of all. If you lead a pretty sedentary life and don't do much exercise, then your protein requirements sit at around 0.8 grams per kilo. And even that is considered by the experts to be too low. 0.8 grams per kilo is the point at which you avoid protein deficiency related disease. If you've ever seen the sad images of children living in countries with severe famine problems, you'll notice they often have distended bellies. Some people, ill-informed I might add, latch onto this and say it's a result of starvation mode, where the body is clinging onto fat stores in the body in order to survive. But this is simply not the case. It's actually a disease called, now I will get this pronunciation wrong, kwashiorkor, which is a disease related to protein deficiency and causes excess fluid retention and swelling under the skin. So setting your protein at this level is for disease avoidance and nothing more. But let's face it, you and I are interested in optimizing your health and performance as much as possible. So we need to do a little better than simply avoiding a disease affecting third world countries. Oh, and feel free to use this piece of information when someone who's just seen What the Health comes up in your face and starts talking to you about protein. Just slap that stupid sumbitch with a wet fish, tell he or she that a Netflix documentary doesn't qualify as science, and move on. Okay, so after inactive people, we have endurance athletes. So these are people who love running, cycling, swimming, or maybe the crazy bastards that do all three. Seriously, hats off to you if you do that. I did cycling for a long time and training for that was like a full-time job. So I've no idea how you do all three. Anyway, because these events are over such long durations, protein requirements are higher than someone who's inactive, but lower than a lifter. There's a clear need to prioritize calories to carbohydrate for efficient use of energy. There would also be a logical argument for people doing ultra-endurance events to work on being more metabolically flexible, i.e. using fat and carbohydrate for fuel, but that's for another podcast, or never, because it's quite a dry fucking subject. If you're in this endurance bracket, then your protein requirement is going to sit somewhere between 1.2 to 1.7 grams per kilo. And my advice would be to lean towards the higher end of that scale. And so, now on to the moment you've all been waiting for. Live from the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada, it's time! 5 rounds in the UFC! Sorry. I thought it was Bruce Buffer for a moment there. Okay, so most of you out there are likely to be gym bods, lifting weights, sculpting, and building those badass bodies. What's your protein requirement? Well, lifters should be anywhere in the region of 1.8 to 2.7 grams per kilo. So you can see why 2 grams per kilo is the chosen number. It's a nice round number to remember that sits in the right range. Now, there is research to suggest you'd lean to the high end of the scale if you were trying to lose body fat and already lean, but it's not that important for you to worry about at this stage. Let's turn this into a practical example. Assume I'm 80 kilos. At 2 grams per kilo, I would be eating 160 grams of protein per day. If I went to the lower end of the range and ate 1.8 grams per kilo, that would be around 144 grams of protein per day. Then if I was to push the higher end of the range and eat 2.7 grams per kilo, my protein intake would be up at around 216 grams per day. And that's a pretty big range to work with, a full 72 gram window to work within. And don't forget, this is also you can be optimal with building and preserving muscle, but it's okay to be suboptimal. In fact, suboptimal is just part of life, and you can't be 100% perfect all the time. So let's get back to the original question to wrap this one up. Should you obsess about your protein intake? The simple answer is no. High protein diets are great, but you don't need to worry about hitting the number perfectly every day of your life to the point where it becomes an obsession. Yes, if you're a serious bodybuilder or athlete, these small things can make a big difference. But for the vast majority of people listening to this podcast, There's simply no need to obsess. Try to hit your protein number as best you can because it does have its advantages. But understand, you have a range to work within. And even if you do drop below your ideal protein intake, is it really going to make that much difference? Probably not. So my advice is to keep things in perspective. These things are important, but they should never become an obsession. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. If you did, leaving a review on iTunes would be awesome. And if you're listening on Spotify, hit that green heart to favorite that show. If you want to come and visit me on social media, the place I hang out the most is Instagram, where my username is iron_paradise_fitness. Feel free to come say hi. It's always nice to talk to you, the listeners of the show. And I'd also love to hear what questions and topics you'd like me to cover in the future, because this exact podcast came from one of those questions. So stop by and let me know how I can help you. And if you're interested in checking out the Lean Life Blueprint online coaching program, then follow the link in the show notes, book a call with me, and let's talk. But for now, I'll just say thanks for listening. Keep living the lean life, and I will speak to you on the next episode.